Welcome to the Museum Roadshow. It's April 2010. We're over here at the First National Bank. This building is going to be torn down soon to make way for the Veterans Memorial Park. This bank building was built by E.J. Holmes in 1904. Prior to that, E.J. Holmes had started the bank in about 1885 in Detroit Lakes. He built this building, and stuff for it was hauled in pretty much, I think, on the railroad. Bill McCart had the job of bringing the plate glass windows over to the bank from a railroad car. And this was the largest plate glass windows that had been delivered to Detroit Lakes at that time. He also used his dray line, a team of 4 horses, to skid the vault from the railroad warehouse depot over to the bank and install it. Some close neighbors to the First National Bank after it was built in 1904 was right behind it was a harness shop. We have a picture of that here. And there's also the famous Lewis Hotel that was behind the First National Bank. The Lewis Hotel was in a pretty sad state of repair by 1960. And then as you went north down Washington Avenue to the railroad tracks, of course, the Colonial Hotel was there. I think it was about 1957 when the Colonial Hotel burned up. A&B Supply had their automotive parts store there. Dwayne Dan had a barbershop. There was also Bud's Bar and Billards. You'll see the beer sign hanging above the door. And then, of course, McGregor Drug, which later became Klein Drug. In the early 1900s, there were 4 banks in Detroit Lakes. First National Bank here on the corner. Kitty corner across the street was the Merchants National Bank, which later became the site of the Detroit State Bank. And across the street to the south, the front street, was Security State Bank, which is now Ace Hardware. Detroit State Bank started in about where Matson's Barbershop is in 1919. Eventually they moved over to where the Merchants National Bank was in 1926. But things didn't go very good in the banking industry in the mid-20s when First National Bank had a kind of run on deposits. In 1926, they had $200,000 taken out over a period of 8 months. And on Monday morning, November 8, 1926, the board of directors decided to close the bank. That evening they met and tried to get things reorganized, with some of the businessmen raised some more capital so they could get the bank opened up again. At that time there was only one bank open in Detroit Lakes, and that was the Detroit State Bank. And in a newspaper article in the record in 1927 in February, some bank examiners were looking at the books and trying to figure out if they could be opening the bank again. And a guy by the name of P.C. Peterson from North Dakota was interested in buying the First National Bank building. And he was able to do that in April of 1927. And then there was a kind of a sigh of relief because they hoped that the bank could be reopened. And it was reopened under the name of the Becker County National Bank on May 16, 1927. At that time, P.J. Peterson was the president, and there was a Dr. F.J. Rogstead, he was a dentist at the time, was the vice president. Cashier was Alden Pearson. Alden Pearson had started his banking career at the Security State Bank, and then when it closed, he did something else for probably a short period of time and then became an employee of the First National Bank. Well, this went on until 1938 when Peterson died. Then F.J. Rogstead became the president of the bank. And in 1948, they did a major remodeling on the bank, and when they reopened for business in April of that year, they took back the name First National Bank. And the next remodeling project was in 1960-61 when they really gave it a whole new look. They took out the McGregor Drug Store, which at that time, 1960, had become the Klein's Drug. And that doubled their floor space from 2,200 square feet to about 5,400. The time and temperature clock that flashed the time and temperature was installed sometime during the winter of 1960. And if we have a picture here found at the Becker County Historical Society that shows the street scene from 1960. And you can tell it's the presidential election going on because you can see the big Nixon sign on the side of this old building. And across the street where the Merchants National Bank used to be, and at that time the Detroit State Bank had just moved out of there to their new location on Home Street. That was the headquarters for the Democrats. And if you look closely where the First National Bank building is, you'll notice there's a big hole in the wall. And that's where the Klein drugstore had been. And that was taken out then, and the wall taken out between the bank and the drugstore to double the size of the bank. Eventually, these buildings were all removed, and we think it was about 1966, 67 in there is when the First National Bank got a drive-up teller window. First National Bank continued to operate out of this building until it was 1991. They moved out to their present location on Home Street. And Max Hardware had come to Detroit Lakes in 1970, 71 in there. They'd set up a store between the Hardware Hank and the VFW, and they were pretty crowded. They needed some more room, so they bought the First National Bank building, and then they remodeled that into a hardware store. And the guys went in there with the sledgehammers. They thought that wouldn't be too hard to get that vault out of there. They started beating on it with their sledgehammers and realized that, no, this is more than we want to do it this way. So they got a hold of a skid steer loader with a hydraulic jackhammer on it to take out the vault. They cut a hole in the floor and used a conveyor to move their merchandise from the basement up to the main floor. Max occupied this building until the fall of 2007. They'd moved there in the spring of '92, and when they moved out in the fall of 2007, they went over to the Hedall building that's on Frazee Street, or Old Highway 10, where it's located now. First National Bank, when they moved out of here in '91, they became Norwest Bank in 1994, abouts in there. And then in about 2000, they became known as the Wells Fargo Bank. At the time when Alden Pearson was working here at the bank, I remember as a small boy hearing stories told about dealings with Alden Pearson. He was a real easy guy to deal with. There wasn't much fanfare if you went in there and asked for a loan, and you had respectable character in the community, and you were the kind of a person they could trust. They would just loan you the money. And one guy was talking to me about coming to Detroit Lakes, I think it was in the late 50s, early 60s, to set up a business. And he told Alden Pearson, I need $3,000. And with a little conversation, the money was given to this man. He said they didn't even ask for any collateral. And I can't help but think that many times that $3,000 came back to this bank. And as I think back about these banks in Detroit Lakes, millions of dollars that went through this First National Bank, and all the goodwill and building of community that occurred by people doing business at this bank.